All right, what's up, Dragon Brood? There was a big update today to the Commander brackets and a lot of things covering Commander. And since I'm on the Commander format panel, I figured it'd be good to give you a little bit of insight on the things we went over. So I'm going to go over to the article that Gavin posted and give my feedback on a couple of things, give you a little extra insight on how some of these things came to be. So just going through the article quickly here, he does touch on how we had the big Commander Summit, and this was actually pretty cool. We had everybody there except for, I believe, two members, and they were teleconferencing in. But basically, we talked about everything that's in the article and then some. Some things that won't be changed for a while. Some things we're still discussing. Uh, taking a lot of feedback from each of our different communities, talking about competitive, talking about casual, how stuff affects retailers. We looked at future products and gave feedback, like just so many things. So if you're ever wondering what it is that the commander format panel does other than just make rules for a commander, like we are actually kind of the feelers, the voice, the feedback, whatever, of all these different things for Wizards. And it's actually working out pretty well so far. So it was really fun, really interesting. We spent 3 days at Wizards of the Coast in Renton, Washington, which was fantastic. They treated us very well. It was a very, to put it lightly, it was a little bit draining in a way, but not in a bad way. It was just the best. The way I would describe it is like the most productive, like seminar or whatever that I'd ever been to, because we literally discussed so many things and everybody went back and forth. There were opinions on a lot of different things. Don't believe that everybody here feels and thinks the exact same way. It's actually good that we have a lot of different opinions. So, yeah, it was really fun. You'll probably see more stuff coming out of this in the future. Now, in this section, it's kind of wordy, but basically, the biggest thing we had feedback wise pretty consistently from everyone was just more clarity in the brackets. And here's the thing we knew going into it that you can't really solve for is there's always going to be bad actors, right? There's going to be the people that want to be big fish, small pond. They want to beat up on all the players in their local store who have lesser decks. And it's hard to avoid that, right? Like people who wanted to play bracket 3 but then want to still put to the most grieferous deck together, if you want to call it that, and try to beat everybody, but then say, "Oh, well, I don't know why you're mad because I don't have any game changers." Technically they're within the rules. But what we realize is a lot of people weren't playing by the expectations of each bracket or the intentions of each bracket, more accurately, and more just by the letter of the law. So we tried to give more clarity to each of those things. And again, this is version 2. We're trying it out. We will definitely need to clean up some language and whatever, but we wanted to at least have this for people to play with through the holidays and things, and we can review it at the beginning of the year. And here we get into the individual changes, but let me bring up a graphic that'll make it a little bit easier. There we go. So going across, we're going to go, I guess, left to right for you guys. But starting at bracket 1, this is what we decided to call exhibition. We tried to give them names as well, so it'd be easier to also kind of understand the feel of what you're trying to play. Because there is something to where when somebody says exhibition or somebody says upgraded, like it has more just a deep rooted connotation to the words more than just saying bracket 1 or bracket 3. But basically, changing everything on bracket 1, the expectations now are that the goal is to have it be about the theme more than the power, right? This is where you're trying to play just the fun. I want to play all my, I don't know, people wearing gloves deck or whatever, right? Just like whatever it is. You can do that there and expect you're going to have fun. And the goal is generally for everybody's deck to get to show off, do the thing it's trying to do. And another thing we decided to set is a turn expectation. And I've already seen some people getting upset here about, well, what about this type of deck or what about that type of deck? We're not saying that there aren't exceptions, right? Nothing here is the absolute letter of the law. But the thing is, you need to set at least a reasonable expectation. Like if I play, because I play a lot of bracket 1 and 2 commander, right? So if I play a game and the game ends on like turn 7 because just the right combination of things came down, or sometimes your opponent plays a card that powers up somebody else's stuff, like things happen, right? But generally, the idea is you expect to play the longest possible games at exhibition. And that's what we're aiming for. And 9 turns minimum seems fair, right? People aren't going to be upset playing exhibition if the games end after turn 9. Now, granted, a lot of your exhibition games generally going to go 12, 13, 14 turns. I played one most recently in at MagicCon Atlanta that I think we went for like 17 turns or something. And stuff was happening every turn, so it wasn't like we were just sitting there. But that's what those types of games are, and that's totally okay. But if that same game would have ended on turn 9, we would have been okay with it. Now, moving on to bracket 2, the next section here is the definition we came up with. And by the way, credit for this graphic to Rachel Weeks. She put this all together from all of our feedback and everything else. And I had an idea of what something would look like, and hers was a better version of what I was going to do. So credit to her where it's due for sure. But this is to have an unoptimized and straightforward deck. So what this means is, while you not may not be building exactly for theme, I have, like, for an example, a Black Panther +1/+1 counters deck, right? It's straightforward. Everything's putting counters on everything. It's doing fun, big stuff, but it's not necessarily the most optimized thing, right? There's no tutors. Some of the lands aren't necessarily the best because they're there more for a theme to proliferate my counters or whatever, right? So in those cases, that's where a lot of your decks are going to fit. You're usually built around a idea or a concept, but maybe a certain type of creature deck or whatever, and you're just doing everything to just get those onto the battlefield and just do that thing. And that's probably where you're going to fit a lot of the time. But because all the cards are working together cleanly, the games are going to be faster than they are in exhibition. And we set the turn at 8, but again, it's expect to play at least 8 turns. Again, sometimes things will go longer, sometimes things will go, actually, most of the time they will probably be longer, but sometimes they will be shorter. Now, if somebody comes in and tries to end the game on turn 4, it's like, okay, you're definitely playing in the wrong bracket. If it ends on like turn 6 or 7 because a certain string of circumstances happen, we're okay with that, as long as it's not happening every time. But yeah, generally speaking, you want to go at least 8 turns here, and you should have very low pressure games here, right? People aren't trying to hurry up. You might be playing some inexperienced players. And we put the line in here too that it is more of a social interaction at these lower levels, which is important to remember. Okay, now to bracket 3, which we're calling upgraded. And bracket 3 was probably the most, I don't know if I'd say contentious is the right word. The most discussed, it's where there's the most gray area in the community, I think. That a lot of people don't want their decks to be looked at as bad, and I put that in quotes, playing at 1 and 2, but they're afraid of the competitive edge that you have at 4 and 5. So they're trying to slot into 3, which is understandable. It's also where you get to play game changers. Understand all of that. So, reading the description, the decks are to be powered up with strong synergy and high quality cards. They can effectively disrupt opponents. And this is basically saying, like, all right, this deck is built to be a real threat, right? Not necessarily a high level threat to end games quickly, but you will be doing lots of things, interacting with your opponents, having an efficient plan. This is what you're trying to do at this level. The game changers are likely to be value engines and game ending spells. So obviously you're just playing, since you're getting a very limited number of game changers, you're playing the best to optimize what you can on those just 3 slots. Because I believe that's what we left in this. If I'm looking at, have to double check the bracket. Yes, we did still say you still get 0 to 3 game changers. Now your win conditions that can be deployed in one big turn from your hand, usually because of steady accrued resources. And what they're saying is you can usually ramp up to whatever the big thing is. Maybe it's a crater hoof. Because one of the things, we had somebody on the format panel say, one of the ways to look at these brackets, which I thought was very good, was what turn are you okay dying to crater hoof behemoth? Right? That sort of shapes a lot of discussions when you think about it. And here it's saying, okay, maybe we ramp up over the first few turns, but around turn 5 or 6, there could be a crater hoof behemoth. And you're like, okay, that's what we expected at bracket 3. Because really, people could have removal spells, people could have more sweepers, people have more counter spells, whatever. There's going to be more of that at 3 than you're definitely going to see at 1 and 2. So that's kind of loosely what I thought was a decent barometer to think about for bracket 3. But the gameplay at 3 is going to be different than 1 and 2. because there's going to be tends to be more back and forth, right? I'm killing your artifact. You're doing this thing, all right? You're going to go this thing, all right? I need to kill that creature, right? That's what a lot of those decks are doing. There's a lot more back and forth that way. Whereas in the lower brackets, there still will be some interplay between the decks, but more of like, okay, I'm getting rid of this thing because it's a real problem for me to do the thing I want to do, but otherwise you do your thing, right? At 3, it's like, no, I just need to stop you from doing your thing so I can get to do all the things I want to do, and that's fine. But again, with some limited choices. And I also want to throw in here that people have asked, like, well, can we add another bracket? That was something we actually discussed on if we should add another bracket. And the reality is, no matter where you add a bracket, people will want another bracket, right? Like, no, if we put a 3.5 and then we just made it 6 brackets, then somebody say, well, what's the difference between 3 and 4 now as opposed to 4 and 5, right? There's always going to be something. So it's just, you kind of have to make it work within the set. Plus, you also have the issue of fracturing, right? Where you end up in a situation where, let's say we went all out and we say, okay, now there's 7 brackets. Well, now you end up in these weird situations where, all right, I have a 3, but you have a 5. Is that going to be a good game, right? It's harder to figure out everybody's expectations the more brackets you add. So for now, we didn't think adding an extra bracket was the right answer. Moving on to bracket 4, optimized. Decks do not adhere to the CEDH metagame reserved for bracket 5. And generally, what this means is you're playing powerful decks, but you're likely not playing anything that's in what we would call the CEDH meta. All those popular decks, the popular combos that are working there, whatever, you're not going to see those in 4. Those are going to be for people who truly want to play competitive Commander. But your decks are still going to be lethal, consistent, and fast, designed to take people down as fast as possible. And again, games can still be super strong here, or decks can be super strong, games can be super fast. Doesn't mean you're not playing any of the cards that you would see at competitive Commander, but it's not metagame decisions taken into account. Obviously, your game changers you're playing here are probably going to be for fast mana, for resource building, because you're going to have a limited number of turns. So you're just trying to be as big and as efficient as possible. And the gameplay, as its description, set to be explosive, powerful, feature huge threats, and efficient disruption to match. Generally, you should expect to be able to play at least 4 turns. And this might sound like a very small number of turns, but people playing at the higher end of Commander games, I would say generally at 4, I see a lot of 5 and even 6 turn games, but they don't go a lot longer than that at 4 in my experience. So a game ending at 4 isn't crazy. It can happen, but that's again the least number of turns people tend to expect. Now, moving on to CEDH, not a lot's really needed to be said. This is just the most competitive, highest end of Commander, and truthfully, it is what you expect it to be, right? Games can end on any turn. Everybody's playing the most efficient cards. You'll probably rarely see things that cost more than 4 mana. You know, I think there was a Lumra deck, I think, that in the competitive Commander space that actually played Lumra as a commander, so that's kind of cool. But it feels more like the exception than the rule to the format. But yeah, obviously, if you want to go all out, you want to play all your game changers, you want to play the craziest stuff, you want to play the most high end things, great, get into bracket 5. Also, notice at the top of this bracket, one of the things that was added was the arrows to kind of help you understand, right? That the more to the left of the bracket you are, then that's more for the theme, casual, flavor, whatever, right? The more to the right that you are, the more speed, efficient, powerful cards, expected staples, all the way to being the best of the best of the metagame, right? So hopefully this whole chart helps kind of give more of an explanation to the expectations for each of the bracket, more than just like what should go in each bracket. So, quick review, highlights. Bracket 1, mostly for the focus on the theme, right? You're building flavor decks, fun, quirky things, trying out new strategies, whatever, that can go there. Oftentimes, pre-cons can go there, but it's not relegated to there. But one of the things we want to talk about in bracket 2 is also bring up the fact that we are not really saying precons belong here, right? Precons can go in any one where you feel comfortable. Some might be stronger, some might be weaker. But I think, and I think, we think generally that tying precons to a bracket was not the best thing to do last time around because it just feels like, oh, I get this and I have to play in bracket two. Like, you don't necessarily have to. So it was good that I think we took that away from being tied to that, especially when you consider something like the Modern Horizons 3 commander decks are way more powerful in some ways than some of the others you would get for a regular standard release, commander deck. But otherwise, generally, bracket 3, 4, and 5 stayed mostly the way they were, but with more clarity for what should be played in each of those brackets. So hopefully that clears up things for you. If not, hit me up in the comments. Actually, better yet, why don't you hop into my Discord? Link is in the description, and we can go into more detail there and have a longer discussion. Because generally, the YouTube comments aren't great for back and forth discussion. Also, if y'all like these type of behind the scenes updates, please, if you take a second here, hype this video, hit the like button, do all the fun stuff, subscribe if you hadn't. I'm a great way to get you into standard if you're just a commander player and looking to hop over to another format. But anyway, other things that were covered here, removing the tutors restriction. This was a kind of a big discussion because tutors varied on all different levels, right? It's like, obviously, demonic tutors very good, but then you have other tutors that, while they search for a thing, aren't as good. So there was a lot of discussion there, but decided to remove the tutors restrictions from the brackets entirely, and the ones that are really powerful just stay on the game changers list, and hopefully that takes care of itself. Again, we're still in beta. This is basically version 2. We'll come back and review these probably around the beginning of the year in February-ish, probably. But for now, we at least want to see how this plays out and how it affects games. Yeah, and the next thing was Commander game changers and kind of thinking about how we feel about them and what ultimately should and shouldn't be on there. And there's two things that Gavin points out here in the article, but high mana value cards. If you're spending tons of mana on something in Commander, it's going to be strong. We want to keep the focus on cards that can change the game in the early turns where it can be most frustrating. And we agree with that, right? Like that, sure, these big cards can be powerful, but if they cost way more mana, whether we're talking 6, 7, 8, 10 mana, are we that upset if somebody plays them at that point? Probably not. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of discussion on this change, but we said, okay, what if we pull some of the higher cost ones off? Then what happens, right? So we'll talk about the cards here in a second. And then legends that are just powerful commanders, And he says here, the easiest thing to opt out of is someone's commander. If someone says, I want to play Yuriko, as an example, you know exactly what that means, and it's easy to prompt a conversation. If something is so wildly powerful in the 99 or simply unfun all around, we're fine leaving it on the list. But power alone isn't a reason to list it as a game changer. And let me say, when we first put the game changers list together, there was a lot of discussion. We actually, at one point, even had a spreadsheet set up where everybody went in and we checked different boxes and left notes on each card, and it was a whole thing. And then even once we had the top selected, we still had further discussion and voted on them, and it was a whole thing. So to even get to that list was already a lot of discussion. But I do kind of see, and I'll be honest, I'm more on the fence of like, I'd rather them stay on the game changers list, but I also get it, right? If you want to play with the powerful commander, cool. Again, we can look and say, hey, I don't know if I want to play that type of game right now. Or some of those commanders just fit into higher brackets, right? Especially now with the clearer language. So that's part of what this is about too, is saying, okay, let's take these off. We know they're higher power. So they should, generally speaking, be in decks that are at 3, 4, 5, right? If we start seeing a lot of those decks at lower brackets and they're creating a lot of not fun experiences, then we can come back and say, you know what? We gave it a shot. They get back on the list. But the idea is, if a thing creates a lot of unfun experiences, then yes, it should definitely be on the list in addition to being powerful. But if it's just powerful and it's fine, okay, let's see what type of decks decide to play it and what brackets they fall into. So with that being said, some cards did get removed from the Game Changers list. So we have Expropriate, which makes sense. I mean, it's 9 mana. Again, very good card, but totally okay, I think, to have it come off. Jin-Gitaxias, this one is one of the ones I was a little more concerned with personally, because if it's being played, we'll say fairly, then it's a nuisance, but it also is a late game card, so we don't care. If people are finding ways to trick it into play, reanimate it, blah, 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 it becomes a real issue. So we'll see what decks decide to play it and where, but I think it's going to be fine generally. Sway the Stars is interesting. Another one, it's 10 mana. Players shuffle up, each player's life total becomes 7, blah, blah, blah. I don't mind this one really. This is one I kind of want to see out in the field and see what happens, because it does multiple things here: resetting hands, resetting life totals to make games end sooner, whatever. But it is 10 mana. So again, if people are finding weird ways to resolve this, then sure, I guess. But that shouldn't be happening too much at the lower brackets, so it's probably safe. Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. This one's another one that, while I do like the card and I played it, in the past, it is one that is a mild bit concerning because it does slow games down a lot of times where people just don't want to tap things or whatever, but it's not awful. Again, 8 mana. We'll see how it functions out in the world, but it's probably going to be fine. Now, when we're talking about commanders, this is the other issue where we have commanders that are strongest in the command zone is the category that he used here. But Kinnan, I think everybody agrees, strong commander, powerful card. Some people may want Kinnan in the 99 and not even as a commander. So, sure, why not? And Urza, High Lord Artificer, obviously another one that we know is good and strong, but it should likely be being played at the higher brackets, and at that level, it's probably okay. Same with Winota. Yuriko, I think there are more decks where Yuriko could be played at a 2 potentially, depending on if you're just doing like a super theme ninja deck potentially. But realistically, it's probably a higher bracket commander as well. And then a couple of cards that, were on there, but we didn't think were that bad to pull off. Deflecting Swat comes off the list. And interesting enough, Food Chain. But I feel like if you're playing Food Chain, you're probably trying to do combo-y things, which puts you at bracket 3 at a minimum, 4 realistically. So I don't think it's too upsetting to have that come off the list. I'm going to take a quick second here to also say that, yes, we did discuss bringing back Banned as Commander, right? So you just can't have it as Commander and it goes in the 99. It's a topic that comes up all the time. It's come up for, hell, even when I was back on the CAG. It came up every few months. We talked about it. But right now, we don't want to have a third category of stuff. I guess you have 4th category of stuff to keep track of. So for now, we're going to leave it off. Maybe, and I'm not going to say it'll never happen, but maybe in the future, once brackets are solidified and everybody's comfortable playing with them and we all understand what the brackets are and the language is all figured out, then we can maybe consider looking at that as a future thing. But for right now, for the near future, we are not doing Banned as Commander. So just want to put that in there because I know that conversation is going to come up and start. It's just not a thing right now. Now, the next category is interesting because there are a lot of cards. And actually, here's another thing that we didn't talk about. At the Commander Summit, we actually went card by card for every card that's on the ban list and the Game Changers list, and every card potentially that has gotten a lot of discussion to be on the Game Changers list or the ban list. And literally, we all went through, we voted on every card. If there were people objectioning and it was close, we had each side make their arguments. Like, it was we spent the better part of one of the afternoons, half a workday probably, on just that. So if you're questioning why things are on or off, we had extensive discussion about all of these, I promise you. But cards that stayed that I think are also going to come up in discussion, I'm glad he pointed these out in the article. But yes, Consecrated Sphinx. I mean, people want it. There were some people really fighting for this to come off the list. The problem here is at 6 mana, it's just so good, and it shows up in so many decks. And it makes games at lower levels very weird because anybody doing any incidental thing to draw cards is creating all this extra value for someone, and then you get into like, well, I want to draw, so you get to draw, and then it just gets silly. Coalition Victory, it's technically expensive. I mean, it does cost 8 with 5 Wooburg mana in there, but as he pointed out here, it does literally end the game. You know, like, so as much as people want to be upset and say, why is this still a game changer? Like, it does just end the game, you know, like, and it's easier to do than when it was when it first ended up on the ban list, but we have recently just unbanned it, so it stays on the game changers list. And that's probably going to be a theme for a while, is if we unban something, it's going to the game changers list. Will it ever come off that? We'll see. It'll depend on how it gets played and whatever over time. But that's kind of going to be like the soft unlock, and then we'll see what happens. For now, Coalition Victory is still staying on the game changers list. Panoptic Mirror. Yeah, there was actually a lot of discussion on this card. But, you know, as he notates here, I wanted to give it a little more time as a game changer before seeing if we can pull it off entirely. Similar to Food Chain, the combo protection at lower brackets does a lot to shore up concerns, which I agree with. Kind of what we were talking about with Food Chain, it's likely going to be at 3, 4, 5. You won't see it at the lower levels. But we're also going to continue and see how these cards are played and the feedback we get from the community before we decide to pull them off the list. But yeah, I'll do a slow scroll here. They put all of the game changers here so you can see all the creatures, all the instants, enchantments, planeswalkers, artifacts, kind of all down the list here. Obviously, on the site, they've all been updated as well. So yeah, some elephant in the room stuff to talk about as well. Rhystic Study, as he points out here, we had a lot of discussion about, this was one of a couple of cards that solicited a lot of discussion. And there's a lot of considerations around this card, right? It's almost a staple of the format that people are used to seeing. But at the same time, there's a lot of like, I get tired of like, did you pay the one, slowing the games down, having to double check. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 Rhystic Studies out. Now everybody's drawing extra cards because nobody wants to pay the mana. And it just gets kind of weird. And I'll be honest, it's close. But it is one that we have heard discussions around and that people are on both sides of the fence on this. I mean, we also have to pay attention to, there's a lot of people that got fancy, crazy versions of Rhystic Study because there have been several over the years. You know, as he noted here, as far as we can tell, it's loved by many. It's not quite as iconic as a Soul Ring, obviously, but it's not that far off. And that was one of the big cruxes of the discussion. Like, so many people really are attached to their Rhystic Studies at this point. But not to say, again, something could change in the future, but for now, it really didn't go anywhere. And then Thassa's Oracle. This is one of the reasons I like having the Commander format panel, because we had some very interesting discussions about this, where for a card like Thassa's Oracle, you almost never see it at the lower brackets, right? So the conversation really becomes for those that play competitive. And we do have members of the Commander format panel that play a lot of CEDH, right? So they were the ones kind of leading the discussion on this, on how you feel about it. Should we do something about it? What does that lead to on the next deck if we get rid of this? Like, all that stuff, right? And that's the other thing, too, that I want people to be aware of in these discussions. That where we needed to, when it involved more casual stuff, we let the people in those spaces or that play more of that or are bigger parts of those communities lead the charge in the discussion. And when something like Thassa's Oracle come up, where I play next to 0 competitive commander, we let those members lead the discussion and give us the stats and the information from their community or whatever. So there's voices from all over the community here. I don't want anybody to think that any one person or group or whatever has more of a say than everybody else. That wasn't it at all. Like, we genuinely had very constructive, in-depth discussions where every group got to put in their expertise or their experience toward the discussion. And one of the things I'm glad that he points out here is that we would rather put stuff on the game changers list than ban stuff as a collective, right? But if it keeps coming up in discussion and we keep seeing, you know, in the states, as far as competitive commander goes, we keep seeing tournament results or wherever where this is a thing and people are not happy about it, eventually we will have to put something on the ban list, right? We're trying to avoid that because, people don't like having their cards banned, understandably, especially if you spin a bunch and it's your favorite commander deck or whatever. So we want it to make sure that it's a definitive problem before cards go on the ban list. But if we can leave them on the game changers list and they can still do a little bit and it helps solve the problem, great. And because it's brought up and it'll probably be a discussion in the comments, is one thing that Gavin did mention, that he mentioned on the live stream was hybrid mana. And that's a very interesting discussion. And I'm going to be very careful what I say here because I don't want to give too much that I'm not allowed to say behind the curtain. But while we were there in Renton, we had a very serious discussion with R&D members. And there was even a presentation made to how hybrid mana affects cards they want to make and their job in designing stuff. And it was an interesting thing because we're both trying not to step on each other's toes, right? We don't want to do a thing that makes it harder for them to make cool cards, but they also don't want to make anything that's going to be frustrating for players and cause issues in Commander. So one of the things that was brought up was, can we let players play whatever color they want in hybrid mana? For example, if a card is both red and white mana split, you would be able to play it in a red only deck or in a white only deck. Or maybe you want to play that card in a red green deck, or you want to play that card in a white blue deck. It would be eligible to be played in both types of decks. Now, we haven't moved forward with that yet, but it is definitely a point of discussion that we're getting feedback on. I think the one thing we've heard consistently from the community is that they wouldn't want what we're calling two-brid mana to be included in that. Those are the mana symbols where you can pay a color or two other generic mana, right? So those would not be part of the discussion. It's most of the ones that are just true hybrid mana where you could play either of two colors. And people have asked me how I feel about it. I'm still kind of processing it, truthfully. I think it's an interesting idea. And I thought about how some of my decks would be different because there are cases where I have a mono green elf deck. It would be cool to play Rise of the Redeem in that deck because it's a white green card. But I can't currently, even though it's an elf, because it has white mana in it. Are there things more egregious than that? Maybe. But I think it's at least worth looking into, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Again, if you want to hop in my Discord, we have a channel just for Commander if you want to discuss stuff in there. Links in the description. But yeah, that pretty much is everything that was covered in the announcement. More, like I said, a few extra details there from behind the scenes, what went on at the Commander Summit. But yeah, y'all let me know how you feel about this. If you like these types of videos, if you want more of this stuff where we kind of break down things and go behind the scenes when announcements are made. Also, like, subscribe, do all the things that make the dings. I'd appreciate it. But yeah, that's all of you for now. We'll see you next time.